Near mint condition, the home of collected editions.
That cover's so awesome.
This is Mr. Chris Claremont, a legend.
Melanie goes,
Tired.
how's it going, all you minties? Uncanny Omar here from Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions. And join me today for my advanced overview of the Deadpool and X-Force Omnibus from Marvel Comics. So let's find out what this book is about together. Welcome back, everybody. Before going any further, a big thank you to David Gabriel and the fine folks at Marvel for sending us an advance copy of this omnibus. This omnibus is due out in the direct market and book market on December 16th or 17th, depending on where you get your books. What we are looking at here is the direct market cover supplied by Greg Capullo. On the left-hand side is your standard edition cover. This is actually my original printing, but it's the exact same cover that they are using again for the new standard edition. Art supplied by Ken Lashley and also Greg Capullo. So this is for the first time they're doing a direct market cover for this omnibus. We're going to look at the spines of the books together. Here again, the new printing on the right-hand side, original printing here on the left. And the Marvel logo, actually Marvel looking a little bit bigger up here than over here. But as far as the thickness of the book, this just a little bit thicker. And down here are different images. For the standard edition cover, it's a mashup of Ian Churchill and Art Thibert and of course Greg Capullo. And over here is a Matt Broom image, if I'm not mistaken, with a Ken Lashley Deadpool there. The back of the book, the Merc with a mouth, and the Mutants on a Mission. Right here in the ISBN, retail price for the original printing is $100. The retail price for the new printing is also $100. It looks like they are keeping the same font and it looks like the exact same wording there. Now, before we take the dust jacket off, let's go ahead and put the new printing on the bookshelf. This is technically X-Force Omnibus Volume 2. It does take place after the events of x-cutioners song, so that's something to keep in mind. And yes, I am keeping room there for a New Mutants Omnibus Volume 4. One day, right? One day. But let's go ahead and take the dust jackets off because they are going to be different. Actually, no, they're not. I really thought that they didn't do this with this version. That looks the same. Fabian Nicieza, Mark Waid, Greg Capullo, Ian Churchill, and Joe Madureira. And then the back of the book. It's just that they're using white instead of this black negative over here. That's interesting, but it's the exact same image. Okay. Well, now you know what to look inside. Besides looking at the actual date that it was printed, you can see that if it's white, it'll be the new printing. If it's black, it's the original printing. But yeah, still this image from Ken Lashley and then this image from Greg Capullo. And we're going to focus on this book right here. So we're going to open this up and talk about the stories found in here, look at this artwork, and again, talk about where it fits into the reading order of X-Force, even though I just showed you on the shelf. But we'll also be looking at the extras and the build, and then doing a comparison internally with the original printing. Okay, let's go ahead and get this omnibus open. It's your end sheets and your title page, Deadpool and X-Force, and that's the same image they're using for the spine underneath the dust jacket. And all the credits over here, Fabian Nicieza writing a majority of the stories in here, but also Mark Waid doing that Deadpool miniseries, the second one. But your talent of pencilers through here. A lot of these guys have gone and blown up. Greg Capullo, Ian Churchill, Joe Madureira, Tony Daniel, Dwayne Turner, Derek Robertson, Art Thibert, Aaron Weisenfeld, who I don't think we got enough art during this era from, with also all of these wonderful creators like Ron Lim and Brandon Peterson and Rob Liefeld and Scott Koblish, Lee Weeks. Inkers, that's just the art, but inkers over here like Larry Malstead and Al Milgrom, Richard Bennett, Kevin Conrad, Bud La Rosa, Dan Pinochet, and Harry Candelario, who's been doing a lot of inking during this time, but it was the first time I ever noticed his inks was actually in that Deadpool miniseries. Colorists over here, like my favorite colors of all time, Joe Rosas and Glynis Oliver and Jim Hostin, just to name a few, and letters like Joe Rosen and Jim Novak and Chris Elapoulos and others. Table of contents telling you what you're going to be reading and where you can find each of these comics, and there are page numbers. This is very important in case you haven't picked up X-Men Blue and Gold Mutant Genesis Omnibus, which does collect the X-Cutioners song, or you don't have the X-Cutioners song oversized hardcover, because this omnibus follows up immediately after that. So it doesn't just go after X-Force Omnibus Volume 1, it goes directly after the X-Men Blue and Gold Omnibus, or the X-Cutioners song oversized hardcover, or the trade paperback. Collected in here is X-Force 19 through 31, X-Force Annual Number 2, Cable 1 through 8, Deadpool Circle Chase 1 through 4, that's the original miniseries, that came out in 93, Deadpool, the second miniseries, 1 through 4, New Warriors 31, baby, and Nomad number 20. The book has 872 pages and retails for $100. This is the book that I was trying to get Marvel to change to a X-Force Omnibus Volume 2, but they decided to just keep it the same and reprint it because it might cause some confusion, and who knows, maybe one day we'll get an official X-Force Omnibus Volume 2 mapped differently and may have include the X-Cutioners song fully. Who knows? It's up to them what they release. I'm just here to talk about this book. Okay, spoilers, just in case, and I mean spoilers because you all know I love my ex. And anytime, not my ex-wife, God bless, please don't take that out of context. I mean my X-Men. I love X-Men, so anytime I do these overviews, sometimes I get a little carried away, especially when it's sometimes my favorite period of X-Men. People usually can tell when I've really enjoyed a certain era. We kick it off with this issue of New Warriors. Why is this included in here? Well, that's because it focuses on a lot of the characters that were part of New Mutants and the Hellions during that time, and kind of letting the past go by, while still focusing on just New Warriors, but Fabian Nicieza wrote this. But it is Firestar in the character of T-Hawk over here. Nope, that is the guy from, Street Fighter 2, Super Street Fighter 2, Warpath, that were once part of the Hellions and kind of letting go of their past, because they have moved on. She's with the New Warriors, and he is with the X-Force team. So, saying goodbye to some of those Hellions, and then setting up a new costume for Firestar. And they will have a crossover in the next volume. Now, it is very important to have read X-Cutioners song before reading the next issue collected in here, because it is issue 19, which is kind of the epilogue to X-Cutioners song for X-Force, and it has some of my all-time favorite moments for these characters. I love comics like this when the characters are just sitting down after a huge battle and talking about some of the things that have happened recently and how it's affected them and changed them. Like Lila Cheney having this heart-to-heart moment with Tabitha here. Or Boomer. No, she's called Boomer here. And Boomer just wanting to make everybody a new costume. But there's an underline to that. There's actual subtext to that. That she's not just making new costumes, but it's almost like finding their own way into the world. Beautiful moments here between Sam DaCosta, which of course is Sunspot, and Stevie Hunter. Just heart-to-heart moments, and then you start seeing some, perhaps, relationships blossoming. You start to see this wonderful confrontation here between Professor Xavier and his past student, who has grown. He has followed the way of not just Magneto, but then Cable. It seems like Professor Xavier forgot that, and this is a nice reminder. You start seeing some of the subplot pages here start developing, and it's basically focusing on this character, Vanessa, who was introduced earlier on in the first omnibus of X-Force. Needless to say, it's not just about getting new costumes, that's really cool, but this confrontation about letting go of your kids. I think it's a beautiful metaphor, and I love the mouse, you'll see what I mean, right here, that Sam uses to kind of prove a point to Professor Xavier, and Professor X is like, yo, your point is made, Sam. Now get the hell out. No, I'm just kidding. He doesn't say that. He still loves Sam, but they do have to go and find their own way into the world. This is after the events of X-Cutioners song, so I'm going to forward here. I'm going to keep talking about each single page. So Cable right now, during this time, as far as they know, is dead. He died at the end of X-Cutioners song. And what they're trying to do is get back a lot of his technology that is up in space, and someone is beating them to the punch, and that someone is S.H.I.E.L.D., led by G.W. Bridge and, of course, Nick Fury, and also getting the help of War Machine. And this is the characters, you know, saying, no, this belongs to us. How can it belong to you all? Cable was our leader. He was more than just a leader to me. He might not have been the greatest father, but he was our dad. So this is kind of like Cable's final gift. This will actually evolve into something else in the next omnibus, if you all remember the character of Prosh. So some of the characters have been kidnapped, and they've been kidnapped by these characters known as the Externals, and we'll come back to that in a little bit. We have the return of Weapon Prime. I love the character of Killjoy, even though those are not his colors they end up using later on. I think it's purple. And Tiger Shark. And then again, you have the character of Vanessa, and Deadpool gets involved. That is something to keep in mind. This omnibus is called Deadpool and X-Force. Deadpool is in about a fourth of the stories in here. He shows up in X-Force, and he shows up with another character named Sluggo. And they're not the most likable characters at first, but there's something about his voice that Fabian Nicieza knew to just focus on. And there's a funny way that he approaches murdering people. I know that sounds awful. That's why he's the merc with the mouth. But it just kind of makes him likable. There's a fight against the Externals here. So you have the return of Gideon, who of course manipulated poor Santa Costa, or Sunspot, sorry, I gotta call them by the code names. And you have a confrontation not just between Sunspot and him, but also Richter and Boomer, as she's known during this time. And you have this big subplot that's happening between Hammer and Domino and Grizzly that will lead into the pages of Cable later on. It's like she's almost forming a new Wild Pact. So the very first spin-off series that happens through here is the Cable series. So this is the new ongoing series. Remember when I said that Cable, quote-unquote, died in the pages of the X-Cutioners song? Well, as it turns out, no, he didn't die. He just went away for a while. But where did he go? He's not here with us. Well, starts like in the future. So the idea was to send Cable to the future and then give it a chance to explore this history. I love this complicated storylines like this, right? This is Cable's past, but to us is our future. So we are introduced to a whole bunch of new characters through here. We are introduced to the Clan Chosen, the characters that ran around with Cable. You've got Silo, you've got Boke, you've got Eleven, Hope, what is the old dude's name? Tetherblood. You've got the introduction of Jen Scott, who of course has strong ties to the character of Cable. And you actually have some introduction to some of the antagonists, like the Flatliners, like Tyler, who comes through here, and the first appearance of characters like Sincere and Strife. Not his first appearance, but just coming in as the villains, as like a backup story, really. One of the characters that does make an appearance in these pages that ties to the present is none other than Garrison Kane, the character of Weapon X, or the new Weapon X. So he kind of ties the future and the past together. But Cable looking like this, I think they made him shave off that goatee later on. And the art at the very beginning of the first couple of issues is the inker at the time, Art Thibert, who had done some pencils, but he was just known as an inker. He wasn't the very fastest penciler, which is, I think, why he ended up leaving the book. Before we got some fill-in art from Paul Smith and Klaus Janson through here, setting up the character of Sincere, and eventually setting up what will become a reunion of the Wild Pack with issue number 4 with a wonderful Bart Sears cover. Yeah, right here. And the confrontation between G.W. Bridge and Cable and some of the sins of the past that Cable committed, of course, affecting them and Hammer. Now, before he could come back to present day and get reunited with his X-Force, we gotta get the guy shaven. He can't just show up like this through the present day, ain't nobody gonna recognize him, so he shaves and he grows his hair out again, looking younger and younger than ever. And then we get the Deadpool miniseries. This is what made a lot of us, including myself, a huge fan of Deadpool. Like, I liked the way he looked, much like a lot of us did when he first appeared. But this solidified my love of Deadpool. I was like, actually, he's funny. It works. He's a bit douchey and kills people, but he actually has a righteous way about him. This is the very first miniseries, so it is so cool to see, first of all, Garrison Kane come out of the pages of Cable and jump right here, and then Cable will go into X-Force with the Fatal Attractions crossover, X-Force 25, but this right here is just awesome how everything was tied together. Of course, it helped that Fabian Nicieza was writing X-Force, he was writing Cable, and he wrote this miniseries. But what happens through here, so you get to see the character of Tolliver and what he plans to do with characters like Vanessa, which of course involves Garrison because he has a past with these characters. We are also introduced to some new characters, and I think this actually utilizes the character of Zero the most out of anything that was happening at the time, because at first you just think Zero's this guy. He called him a neutered, what do you call him? A neutered Arnold Schwarzenegger. You think he's just a teleporter, but no, there's actually a lot more to the character than you think. So we're introduced to a new villain of Slayback. You've got the return of Sluggo. You've got Vanessa through here, who's a shapeshifter, and of course played a big role in the first Omnibus. And then the return of Black Tom Cassidy and the Juggernaut. Because the last time, remember, we saw him was in the pages of X-Force, I think number 5. It was the crossover with Spider-Man, where Deadpool shot him up. And then we have these 3 new characters. You have Comcast, Makeshift, and Rive. Designed by Joe Bad, so you figured, oh man, they're going to make toys of these? Actually, they did make a toy of Comcast. I forgot that they did make a toy of that character. And let's just say it's surprising how little they stayed. There he is. Oh, I'm sorry. It's the neutered albino Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's what he called him. So after that miniseries, we jump back to X-Force. And here, damn it, I said I would not talk about each issue. It is important to note that this is just part of the Fatal Attractions crossover. This is a reunion with Magneto, who was a lot of these characters' headmaster when they were part of the New Mutants. But this leads into, of course, Uncanny X-Men and then X-Men 25, and you all know what happens there. The Fatal Attractions Omnibus has just recently been reprinted, if you're interested in that. This is the aftermath. So Greg Capullo does end up leaving the book. Matt Broom takes over for a couple of issues. We're introduced to a new character named Rainfire. And actually, one of my favorite characters that kind of made a cameo before this annual is introduced through here. Adam X, baby, the Extreme. That's right. He has a team up with X-Force here, but a lot of misunderstandings. He has the ability to use blood against his enemy, their own blood. And that's why he wears all these extreme spikes. And he might have ties to the Summers family. To a lot of us, he could be that third brother. But to most people, they're like, who the hell is Adam X? Vulcan all the way, baby. Or Gambit, I guess. This is one of my favorite extras they included. In this annual, so we have pinups by Chris Bachalo, Bill Sienkiewicz. But this right here by Larry Stroman aren't really, this isn't a pinup. This is actually the first page of what would have been the X-Cutioner song from X Factor. But he decided to leave the book and went and joined the Image Tribe to work on a book called Tribe. But we did have his first page, so I assume he did the first couple of pages before Jay Lee took over the book. Matt Broom again, doing the fill-in art with Rainfire and his this is the new Mutant Liberation Front with this character right here that could have ties to Danielle Moonstar. Maybe. Some of these characters come from the Mutant Liberation Front. Some of them are newer characters. But who is Rainfire? That is the big secret. Then we go back to Cable. By the way, this is mapped perfect. Like, absolutely perfect. You go from comic to comic by story arcs. So if a comic book just has, like, for example, Cable number 5 here is this assassin that is sent back from this apocalyptic future named Sincere, and he's here to kill Cable. And it kind of deepens that whole Tolliver mystery. But after that, you go into Nomad right here, which is the 6-pack reunion, and really half of a 6-pack. It's just a 3-pack right here, teaming up with the character of Jack Monroe. We have the return of Adam X the Extreme, and perhaps the character of Shatterstar was once married, maybe, and his wife appears through here. I always wanted Tempo to be one of the good guys. I always wanted her to join X-Force, so it really happy that she ended up joining the X-Men later on. This is probably one of my favorite story arcs through here. This is Fathers and Sons, which is a trilogy in the pages of Cable, 6 through 8. It is the origin, the true origin of Cable. Ever since he first appeared, ever since the X Factor Endgame, and I guess all the way back to Uncanny 201, the question has been, what is the origin of Cable and what is his ties to the Summers line? Everything is cleared up through here. If you were confused by the X-Cutioner song and his origin, well, fear no more, because this is clearing up everything. And by the way, again, Weisenfeld, his art just did not do enough content back in the day. Like, I know he went over to Image to do, what was it, Team 7, but I wish he had stayed to do more of this. So after that, we go back to more X-Force, where Teresa and Siren and Warpath end up going back to Ireland and kind of tying up some loose ends with Black Tom Cassidy and the Juggernaut, and her facing something serious, like her addiction problem to alcohol. Then we end this with Sins, Sins of the Past, which is the miniseries by Mark Waid and Ian Churchill. This is the only Mark Waid stuff in this omnibus, and this is the only story in here that's not written by Fabian Nicieza. So this really is a perfect place to jump and read this, because we kind of have the setup with issue 31 of X-Force as to what happens to these characters after they leave and come back to America. And this jumps in right here with Black Tom Cassidy and Siren and Banshee. And of course, drawn by not just Ian Churchill, but also Ken Lashley and Lee Weeks. There's a lot of different artists that do this book. It is the 90s, by the way. This era of the 90s, you're going to be prepared to do a lot of this. A lot of that. Not as much as the previous volume, but plenty. And then we get to the extras. Alright, I didn't talk about each and every single book. Good gracious. The behind the scenes from the Marvel age. I remember there were changes that were made as to, like, the appearance of Cable, how he was supposed to come back in issue 25. I think, actually, Greg Capullo had to change that because of his beard. And then there are models for the 3D card. Marvel Age. Oh, yeah. Marvel swimsuit, baby. Look at that. Mark Pacella's ridiculous take on Cable. And then you've got Chris Batista here. And some pinups from the Poster magazine. And this, which they've also used, this is a poster, by the way, from Greg Capullo, but they've also used for the omnibus cover. This came with a polybag with a trading card introducing Adam X the Extreme. The X-Men Series 2 trading cards featuring the X-Force characters, the trade paperback covers, more trade paperback covers, and premiere hardcover covers. Oh, that's cool. I don't remember that. And Cable Classics, and then, of course, your omnibus cover. Now, this does have the exact same material as the previous printing, but let's talk about the binding. 872 pages. It is sewn binding, and this one is printed at the iMac printer. But the paper stock is actually thicker. We'll do a comparison here in a little bit just to make sure, but it feels a little thicker than the original printing. This is the way it lays over, so you saw that eye. There's very minimal gutter loss right here, including this wraparound cover. And as far as the bleed through, there is some bleed through happening, but we'll compare it to the original printing. As a matter of fact, let's go ahead and do that. Okay, the original printing here on the left hand side is printed at the Leo paper in 2017, and then the new printing over here again at the iMac printer. And this is the way both of them lay over. And let's talk about the bleed through. So yeah, there's bleed through happening. Actually, it's a little more prominent over here, just a little bit, not by much. And that actually has to, it's crazy, but that actually has to do with the paper stock, because the paper stock of the iMac printer feels a little thicker, just a little bit. And again, the way that it lays over. So let's go to the double page spreads that we have here with this issue of X-Force. And, honestly, it's looking about the same as far as the double page spread. So that's good. That's good. And the color's just looking a little bit darker. Like the tone is just a little bit darker in the new printing. But that is it. That is Deadpool and X-Force Omnibus. And that, as they say, is that. If you're interested in purchasing this omnibus, don't forget to check out our sponsors. BD Cosmos, the Canadian leader in graphic novels. They have a physical storefront in Montreal, Quebec, and their website, bdcosmos.com, offers 25% off your order of over $99 or more, and free shipping everywhere in Canada for every order of $250 or more.
Their shipping care is exceptional. Your books will stay cozy through the rough Canadian weather and arrive to you in near mint condition.
After checkout, let them know Near Mint Condition sent you their way, and you'll be added to the monthly $25 gift card raffle. Entries are valid for new and returning customers.
Don't be afraid to call or email them. Ask them questions. Their staff is always happy to help guide you towards the right purchase. Visit their website, bdcosmos.com, for more. BD Cosmos, with rewards and raffles taking care of customers in Canada. Eh?
CheapGraphicNovels.com, your online home for graphic novels and collected editions up to 50% off cover price. They have excellent shipping and prompt and helpful service. Check out their bargain deals for up to 90% off cover price. And don't forget, the CGN also takes pre-orders. That way you don't miss out on the hottest releases. And they are currently running a special promotion for you Minties. If you're a first-time customer, after receiving your order confirmation email, reply back to that email and let them know Near Mint Condition sent you their way. They will then apply a free shipping promotional credit to your next order in the US. Cheap Graphic Novels, your source for the hottest books with the kind of deep discount, quality shipping, and customer service that will keep you coming back for more. And that was the content, the page count, and build of this omnibus. In the comments down below, let me know if you plan on picking this cover up, or if you're picking up the standard edition cover, if you enjoy the content that is collected in this omnibus, if you're hoping one day there will be a true X-Force Omnibus Volume 2, or you're just not going to wait around, you're going to go ahead and pick this up, and hopefully they will reprint Cable and X-Force Omnibus, and then give us more, like X-Force and X-Force Omnibus. Regardless, leave those comments down below, smash that like button on the way out. Everyone, stay healthy and safe out there. Much love.